Afghanistan's poppy problem began in 1973 with the overthrow of King Zahir Shah, whose family had ruled the country for 2 centuries. A series of political upheavals followed, orchestrated by the Soviet Union.
First of all, you have to know that the Russians spent 200 years trying to get control of Afghanistan because they wanted Afghanistan as the route to the Indian subcontinent and the sea.
The dreams of empire led the Soviets to invade Afghanistan in December 1979 and begin a brutal 10-year occupation.
روسانو په افغانستان کې ډېر بد خاطرې موږ داغونه لرو. افغانان په شهادت ورسول او ډېر افغانان مهاجر کړل د خپل ملک نه، ډېر افغانان معیوب کړل، ډېر افغانان وځورول ورته چې ژوندي د خاورو د لاندې کړل. نو موږ داغې نه ډېرې سختې او بدې خاطرې لرو. ټول افغانان داغې نه بدې خاطرې لري. د وروسته د راتګ نه او تر وتو پورې د افغانستان خلک د وروسته نه ډېر بدې خاطرې لري.
Throughout the 80s, Afghan fighters known as the mujahadin battled endlessly to force a Soviet retreat.
موږ صرف خپل د علاقو نه د اسلام په نوم موږ خپل عقیدې په لحاظ باندې دا جنګ کړی دی. موږ دوی سره کوم دغه نه لرو، نو خو دا چې ما درته مخکې ویلي چې دوی زموږ په اسلام باندې تعرض وکړه، دا خو داسې تعرض نه و چې دوی یوازې په خاوره وکړو. دوی خو زموږ اسلام نه مانه. دوی خو موږ باندې هغه خپل سوسیالیستي چې دی که نه منل.
The mujahideen resistance surprised the world. Soviet troops were forced out of Afghanistan in 1989, leaving a devastated land behind. They also left the country without a generation of leaders to move it forward.
Many of them were executed. They were simply thrown into prison, some were tortured to death. Others were driven into exile to save their lives, and they're gone. So a whole generation of experienced leadership has been lost.
Lost, too, was the country's stable rural economy. 10 years of war left farmland ravaged or abandoned. Irrigation systems, livestock herds, roads, and markets were destroyed. Meanwhile, with few alternatives, desperate farmers turned to opium poppy cultivation for survival.
Before the Soviet invasion, there was really no cultivation or consumption of opium in Afghanistan to any commercial extent. It is only at the beginning of the 80s that Afghanistan started to develop the cultivation and abuse of opium.
The victory over the Soviet Union morphed during the 90s into a civil war among competing mujahideen factions, each vying for control of the country. Opium became a reliable income-generating crop, not only for farmers, but for the rival forces who needed money to fund their military operations. The Taliban's rise to power in 1996 did not slow opium cultivation.
When the Taliban first appeared in Afghanistan, based on their religion, they took a stand against opium. But as they extended their control into more areas where opium poppy was grown, they found that it was not possible to retain control of the territory while attacking people's livelihoods. So instead, they ruled that while it was forbidden for Muslims to consume opium or to sell it to Muslims, in case of necessity, it was permissible to grow it or trade in it as long as it was not consumed by Muslims.
The Taliban's permissive policy caused annual opium yields to double between 1997 and 2000. Its leaders even used a one-year ban against cultivation to boost worldwide prices on the illegal market.
The Taliban is often credited with wiping out the poppy crop for 2001. That's well reported. What has not been well reported is that Mullah Omar stockpiled 300 tons of opium paste before eliminating the crop. And he was one of the #1 dealers in opium the entire time that he was posing for holy pictures with UN officials talking about the eradication effort.
US-led ouster of the Taliban in 2001 set the stage for a new democracy which outlawed opium. President Karzai made controlling poppy a top priority.
It destroys our economy. It destroys a good family life in Afghanistan, which is the most important thing to have in any country. And most important of all, drug production and trafficking goes hand in hand with terrorism.
In 2004, under great pressure from the US, President Karzai declared jihad against poppy and promised that in 2 years there won't be any poppy plant left in Afghanistan. Well, obviously, this has not materialized at all. There is more poppy in Afghanistan today than there has been at any point in Afghanistan's history. There is more poppy today in Afghanistan than there has been in the modern history of the drug trade.
That fact was underscored by the United Nations report in August 2007.
Afghanistan produces 92% of the world's illicit opium. So we have virtually a monopoly situation.
A monopoly that many believe makes Afghanistan a narco-state.
It is not a narco-state, but it does produce a lot of poppies. Afghanistan has the problem of poppies, and Afghanistan has the problem of the fight against terrorism. We're fighting both.
But the fight against poppy is not going well.
The amount of cultivation in Afghanistan is scary. It's actually terrifying. No other country in the world has ever produced that much narcotics.
Nor has any country in modern times exported as much narcotics. Getting the product to market starts with the sap from the opium bulb being harvested in the fields. Through a series of steps in secret labs, the sap can be processed into grades of heroin inside the country. Then it's sent out along one of 3 main trafficking routes: east into Pakistan, south and west into Pakistan and Iran, and north into the Central Asian states and Russia. With hundreds of miles of open frontier borders and thousands of people pouring across checkpoints each day, smuggling narcotics out of Afghanistan, while risky, is big business. The $4 billion Afghan opium generates internally grows to over $40 billion as it travels through the Middle East, across Europe, and into Great Britain. This is more than a money-making criminal enterprise. Intelligence reveals links between Afghan drug lords, traffickers, and Taliban insurgents who are paid to provide protection against government counter-narcotics efforts.
The Taliban has been one of the principal dealers in opium paste and in heroin. And we have seen the insurgency fueled by funding from the trade in drugs.
Estimates suggest as much as 40% of the Taliban's income derives from opium.
You look at a map of Afghanistan and see where the poppy is grown, and you look at a second map of Afghanistan to see where there's insecurity, it's the same map. Where there's poppy, there's insecurity. Where there's insecurity, there's poppy. And so what we're trying to do is adjust the strategy. We focus more on a closer coordinated counterinsurgency, counter-narcotics effort. We have to work more closely with the military to make sure those efforts are well coordinated.